here today. She is the author of the Luce Hansen Thriller Series from Bold Strokes Books. Crossed, the first title in the series, was the runner-up for the 2015 Indie Fab Awards in the mystery genre. Cross was also awarded the Nancy Dasher Award in 2017 from the College English Association of Ohio. The second novel in the Luce Hansen series is Forsaken Trust and was published in May 2017. And the most recent novel in the series is Deadeye, that came out last July. Meredith lives in Dayton, Ohio, and is a lecturer at University of Dayton, where she teaches composition, literature, and creative writing. You can find out more about her and her books at meredithdoench.com, and I really encourage you to go check out what she's doing. Meredith, thanks so much. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm going to switch over to share screen so that all of you can see a little bit about, let's see, view as present. I'm so glad you all are here. One of the things that I get asked questions about a lot of the time, particularly when people are writing novels, is how to craft a scene or how to make things stand out to readers so they're memorable. And this is one of the things that I really talk about a lot in my classes, is writing a strong scene, and that generally these are the things that readers remember. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you some ideas about how to write a scene, and then we'll look at a couple together, and then we're actually going to write one. So hopefully you have some paper with you, or you can actually just use your laptops to write something. And I'm hoping that you'll leave here with something that can be used towards your own writing as well. So I'm just going to go through some basics, but I really love to have your input. It's weird for me to teach like this because usually we are in a space where we're like in a circle and everyone can see each other and everyone just sort of chimes in. So use the chat bar. And if you have questions as I go along, or you even just have comments, please put them in there. And if I miss them, Elizabeth will still be looking at them. So I just really encourage you to participate in any way that you can. And we'll just kind of get started here. So one of the things that I like to think about is writing as a craft, right? And that just like any other craft, every writer has a selection of tools from the trade. And these are the ones that we generally hear about the most when we think about, and the ones that we go to right away when we think about writing. Setting, world building is generally one of the big ones that we think about. Character and character development, conflict, the rising action that happens in a story, or dialogue, metaphor, theme, tone, mood, point of view, voice, and then we also have scene, right? And scene is something that can be used for any kind of prose writing. So it could be nonfiction, creative nonfiction, short story writing, novel writing. It fits into all of those things. The only difference with creative nonfiction versus fiction is that it's something that really happened, right? But you're still using all of the elements of scene to build out a moment in time that slows everything down for the reader to really focus on. So it doesn't really matter. And genre-wise, all genres really use scene writing. So the big thing that we want to start with is like, what is a scene, right? We hear the word scene a lot, and most of the time when we hear the word scene, we tend to think about movies, and because those are the visual scenes that we normally think about, right? But all writing has it. It's important for dynamic prose because it shows a microcosm of your larger work. The easiest way for me to think about a scene is that it's sort of like a mini story within your bigger story, right? So every scene should have a beginning, it should have a middle, it should have an end, just like your novel does or your memoir does, right? And a scene takes a very crucial moment in your character's story. And there's two things it really should do. It should engage both emotions, and it should also engage real-time momentum or action. Those are the two things that really make like together, that's what makes them memorable, right? And builds momentum to move the storyline forward. So for example, these are the things that we generally see like put into scene types of work. An epiphany, where a writer or where the main character or a character in the book realizes something that completely changes their life, right? A discovery, maybe they've been looking for some answer, looking for something, they make this discovery, and maybe that discovery changes the course of how they're going forward. Sometimes it could be an admission. Maybe they finally admit to something that they haven't been willing to admit to before. Experience is always a great one to put into scene, an experience that really helps us to see the character in a different way and helps to see them grow. So here's my writer's tip. I have a couple of writer's tips throughout this that will be available to you. And also this PowerPoint or this Google slideshow or whatever Elizabeth is going to put up for you on her site. So you can get back to this at any point if you need to. But my tip for you is that great scenes create growth or change in a protagonist in some way. So, and when I say growth or change, I don't mean that they have to have these enormous, massive, changes in the way that they, look, or even like lifestyle changes, things like that. A change can be as simple as they thought something at the beginning of the novel and their thinking about that has completely changed by the end. We all look for growth in our characters. If they don't change in any way, if they stay exactly the same from the very beginning to the very end, it's going to be a really boring story, right? Like it's going to be, if that person or that thing that you're writing about doesn't shift or change in some way, it's going to be very, very boring. So scenes help us create that growth, and they help us show rather than tell the reader how this main character is changing. So as I said before, many people think of movies or think of television series when they hear of the word scene. These visual modes make the use of scenes continually in their work. And usually, it's for good reason why we think of movies and the word scene, mostly because a movie maker or a script writer, that's one of their only tools to work with is scene, right? So they basically string together all of these different scenes that they've written and place them in a sequential order of some kind, right? Where with writers, we have a little bit more to our toolbox of ways that we can manipulate or use words on a page. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But what I thought would be cool to do is to watch a scene together that is very vivid in my it's from the Dead Poets Society. I was trying to come up with a movie that hopefully all of us have seen that wasn't Disney. That was like that's what I was trying to come up with. So I came up with Dead Poets Society. And if for some reason you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's so great. But it's about an English teacher, and the scene that I'm going to show you, he gets a job in an all boys school that's very conservative, has tons of rules. And he's the wild one. He changes the way that he teaches. He changes the students' lives through literature. He's also fired for that, right? So the scene I'm going to show you is one of the ones that's usually listed as like the top 10 movie scenes ever. It's the "Oh Captain, My Captain" scene, where it's such a great scene from the film. Let me actually open up the chat bar here. So let's see here if I can. Sorry, move things around. We've got some in the chat. Excellent. Okay, so what are some things you notice about it? Carla, I love this movie too. It's such a great one. It's stirring for sure. When this starts, one of the things that we talk about with scene, or that we're going to get into here in just a minute, is that there's generally like something that the character is supposed to learn from it. And so like this one was definitely one where our teacher or our main character, it's always great to see Robin Williams again, right? But he definitely has some sort of a discovery or a realization by the end of this that he really truly moved these kids, right? Yeah, Rachel saying there's emotional tension here. Absolutely, right? They don't even need the dialogue. Yeah, because it's all in their actions, the way they're moving. It ties to the beginning and the end. Yeah, you guys got it. Excellent. I thought that this would be a good one to kind of show with this. And we're going to talk about purpose here in just a minute too. Not every kid needed to yell, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," right? Great momentum from our character to character as each makes their own decision, right? And our main character, who is Robin Williams, he realizes what he needs to from this, right? That he truly mattered, that he really did make a change in these people's lives, right? What are some other movie scenes that were really, really memorable? Oh, Jude, you're not seeing everyone's. That's weird.
Meredith, can I just chime in here? So
Yeah.
be sure when you are doing chat to send to all panelists and attendees. That will make sure that everybody can see.
Okay, that will help. Yeah, because I can see all of yours.
Right.
But yeah, you can't see everybody else's. That's the problem. What are some other movies, like what are other movie scenes that really stick out to you that you would say are really memorable for similar reasons? It had strong emotion in it. It had change of character or some sort of realization that they had. Oh, Rudy, that's a great movie. Rudy has some really great moments in it. Any other ideas? Glory, that's a good one too. Brian's song, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. I always think of one of the ones. So I'm a mystery writer and I really love horror stuff. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. But I really, really loved Silence of the Lambs. And I always think of one of the scenes that was like the most tense for me, but also the most changing for our main character, who was Clarice Starling, our protagonist or whatever, when she first went to go meet Hannibal Lecter. And, you know, she arrives at the prison and they're prepping her for, okay, you know, you're going to walk down this hallway of all people on death row. And we have a chair and it's in this distance away from, so he can't reach out and grab you, right? And that moment is so tense of her walking down the hallway. And then, you know, all these men yelling at her, and then she sits in the chair. And I always think of that scene as like, this is your moment of growth right here, right? You're walking down death row. But you guys are listing great ones. The Lion King, watching the growth of Simba is absolutely perfect. Forrest Gump is great too. Yeah, these are great. So back to our idea about seeing, because we're going to actually kind of write some here. But let me go back to our view full screen here. Present. So one of the things that makes a good scene, so we'll start to talk about like kind of how to build one. But when we talk about scene building, usually, at least for the writer, they need to know what the purpose or the goal is of the scene. So it's not necessarily that the reader needs to know that, but as writers, we do. So what exactly do you want to show with this scene? What's the goal behind it? And then the reader watches this character make process towards this goal. So a good scene pulls the reader in as if they are sitting beside the character and watching everything happen. Or it could also be, I've heard it described as being like the fly on the wall, who's in the room watching everything happen, but not actually engaging with the characters in that way. It has action, it engages the senses. And most important, we want the reader to feel like they need to keep reading to find out what happens next, right? So if you think back to the scene we just watched of Dead Poet Society, if you think about Robin Williams' character, which I cannot remember that teacher's name for the life of me, but Robin Williams' goal for coming in at that moment, his only goal is to get his things from his office, right? And then things change in the process of him getting his things. I mean, so when we think about that, what's the purpose or the goal? As a writer, our goal, like I would guess that the writers were thinking, we want him to know that he made a difference. that he changed these kids' lives in some way? How can we show him that with him walking in just to go to his office and then walking back out? And so as as a viewer, we see that. So just a writer's tip, every good scene should have a purpose in the larger work. It should either move the prose forward or build character. Every scene in the story or essay should build on the last. So that's the other thing, if you want to think of them as like building blocks, almost like we're ramping up tension, particularly if you're writing mysteries of any kind. But I would say any kind of like fiction of any kind, you're building tension as you go. And so each scene should sort of build up on that ramp, right? This is one way. I had a professor who used to talk about scenes in this way, and this made a whole lot of sense to me. It's basically just action and a reaction. Something happens and it provokes a response from the people or the characters in the prose. So again, if you think about Robin Williams walking into that room to gather his things, that was the action. The reaction was the way that the students reacted to him in the room and stood up on the table and pronounced, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," right? And that's kind of the way that I think about the scene as well too. And it can be both physical, emotional, or both. And generally, a lot of the time, we use both of these at the same. Both of these are things are happening. I've also, one of the things that was really, really helpful to me when I started writing my books was this idea, and I think that this is really helpful for mystery writers, but I do think that even if you're writing a memoir, this can be just as helpful. And one of the things that I was told was to write a 1-sentence summary of my major scenes. And that way I would know exactly what the purpose was, or how this was going to advance the plot, or what specifically it was going to reveal about character growth. And that was really, really helpful for me to go through my entire manuscript and the scenes that I had chosen to show, really putting 1-sentence summaries on them. Yeah, so that might be something that could be helpful for you as well. So here's the big question, right? Like, where do I start a scene, or where should a scene be? And we, usually a lot of strong writing usually begins with a scene. So whether it's the beginning of a novel, beginning of a memoir, beginning of an essay, a lot of the times the writer starts us in scene, right? It could be in the middle. A lot of writers tend to put them at the end as well too, because that's what they want us to remember. But the big thing inside a scene, like when you're starting to write a scene, is that it should be starting in the middle of things, in medias res, right in the middle of everything happening, right? Middle of an event, middle of activity, think action, movement. And when I say action and movement, I don't mean, I just actually had this conversation with one of my classes this week, that action and movement doesn't have to be this huge, massive thing. It doesn't need to be bombs going off. It doesn't have to be planes crashing and all this kind of stuff to think of action. It could be as little as two people sitting in a coffee shop, drinking their coffee and speaking to one another. That's actually action, right? It could be someone who's driving down the road, listening to music in their car. That's action. So, or movement even. So just think about that too, that the action doesn't have to be these grand, huge things that are happening. It can be as small as a character walking from their kitchen into their family room, something like that. A scene should end when the character has made progress on their desire or goal. In other words, the scene needs to move the storyline forward, which we've been talking about, right? Remember, it doesn't have to end in the way that the character hopes for. There's lots of surprise within a scene. So if we go back to Robin Williams, I don't think that he intended in any way, his goal was just to get his things, right? The surprise for him was the way that the students reacted to him. And so a lot of times, like, that can be really fun to work with as a writer. How can we surprise our character in ways that's going to move them or change them? And that's something that's interesting to work with too. So here's one of the things that as writers, as opposed to a screenwriter, we actually have this other tool that we can use, which is summary. I guess you could say that a movie maker or a screenwriter could do a voiceover or something like that in order to do summary. But as writers, we can actually go back and forth between summary and scene, and kind of maneuver between the two in order to tell our story. And so one of the things that is really important to think about is that there's a huge difference between scene and summary, right? A writer uses both, but summary is meant to speed up the writing, right? And it works by telling rather than showing the details about an event or a time period, something like that, that are not important enough to dramatize in the work or about past events. And there's lots of these kinds of moments in a novel where we need to just move a character from one location to another. We need to move a character up in time. Maybe there's been like a season or something where nothing really has happened with our character and we just need to move forward. So using summary really helps us to be able to do that. The scene then does the exact opposite. It slows the writing way down by showing the reader what is happening in real time. So I pulled some summary statements from some things that I've been reading that I really liked, that I thought were interesting. This one, she felt happy for the first time in months. So this kind of alerts us that we're moving forward, or we've skipped some months here because there wasn't much to say here except maybe she wasn't feeling happy, right? Now she is, and now we're going to start in with what's happening here with this character. This one I found interesting too. The winter was long and cold, and she was relieved when the first signs of spring appeared. I thought this was an interesting way to skip over winter and get us right to the start of spring when something is going to be happening with this character. So these are interesting ways that writers are kind of doing. This was my favorite. She dyed her hair green every 3 months because she knew her mother hated it. I love this. So obviously this writer decided it wasn't important enough to show this character in the bathroom or at the kitchen sink dyeing her hair green, and give us a full scene of that every 3 months. Instead, they're skipping, and we don't know how many 3 months we've skipped over here, but we know that we're moving forward in time. And some writers used full paragraphs for their summaries. Others just use short statements like these, but they all use them, and they're very, very efficient to use them as well. I pulled an example for us to look at also of a scene before I actually have you write one. Let me see if this will. So I used to be an editor for.
Meredith, I'm sorry, can I interrupt? There was a question in the chat. Can you have summaries within scenes, or are they separate?
Oh, that's a good question. So yeah, so sometimes I have seen some writers who have begun their scene with a summary statement like that, where they say something like, it was a long winter and everyone was happy when it became spring, and then they begin the scene that way. And there are places, I think, that if you're in the middle of a scene, that you could have a line or two of summary, but most of the time they are considered to be separate. Yeah, but that's a great question. It's a great question. Sorry, I've missed some of these. When I had that pulled up, I missed a few of these. These are great about what you guys have been putting up here. So anyways, this example that I have for you is from the journal that I used to work for, which is called Camera Obscura. And this was a fiction piece that was submitted. And we all, when we were choosing what was going to go into the journal for that particular edition, we were all floored by this, because this entire story, if you look at this, it is one paragraph here and one paragraph here, and that's it. And it's really a scene, actually, that this person has written. So I will, hang on, let me see if I can close the chat bar for just a second to read this for you. This was one that we were just amazed at, how this person created this. But the writer is Thisbe Neeson, and her piece is called Dear at Rest. So driving home near dusk this evening, after visiting hours at the eating disorders clinic where I've incarcerated my daughter in hopes of keeping her alive, I passed something on the side of the road that nearly killed me. On the fast lane shoulder, up against the median, where the asphalt still held the sun's heat, A mother deer lay spooned around her baby, the two of them contented as cats, and my heart broke the way a mother's does at such sights, but then instantly seized with fear as I imagined the moment when, the ground grown cold, the deer would stand, stretch their spindly limbs, and start across the road for the forest. I felt the flash of the brights, the frozen terror, the god-awful, irretrievable impact. And then I realized it happened already. I didn't have to look in my rearview mirror to know now that those rested deer lay in a pool of their own blood, intestines stretched behind them, baking into the highway asphalt. And I cut across 2 lanes of traffic to the slow shoulder, my stomach heaving, and managed to punch on my hazards before the sobs took over my body, overtook the hazards metronome, and then drowned it out entirely as I wept onto my steering wheel for the cursed, blessed luck of that mother and child to at least have died together. So what do you all think about this as a scene? How does this work as a scene? The stuff we've been talking about. Yeah, Catherine, wow. Yes, wow. It is a moment of wow, for sure. It is an amazing piece of writing. The other thing that always amazes me too, and I actually absolutely notice it because I'm reading it out loud right now, but the length of the sentences are enormous too, but yet they work, right? But the scene of her pulling up on these deer laying in the middle of the road, the mother and the babe, I guess the doe, right? And then thinking about her own child and what's happening with her child, right? You're right. Completely pulls you in, connects you with the narrator. Intense event of leaving her child, Catherine. Yep. The juxtaposition between the mother and the children are incredible. Yeah, these are great. This is something that stands out as something that I always remember reading for this journal. I read a lot of stuff for this journal. I mean, I can't even tell you how many stories I read and sifted through, but this is one that always stands out in my mind because of this clear, crystal clear, actually, image that I have of this deer laying in the road. And also too, of what Tracy just said, like the mother's love of protecting their child. Like that just stands out so clear to me here. And really, this is the image of it. This is a scene that this person has put together. We get the idea that there's a backstory here. Like we understand as readers that there's something going on with her daughter. They've had a lot of issues. Her daughter is ill. She's in the, we get all of that in just one line. But the real story is her pulling up on this baby and mother in the road, and hold your emotions throughout. Yeah. So this is something that I think of with scenes too, is that there's usually an image of some kind that is, it can be an image, like particularly if you're working with a longer piece in nonfiction, or you're working with a longer piece in fiction form, where there's some sort of an image that sort of carries through in the novel. So in this particular case, like let's say this was a novel, maybe the deer would come back multiple times in different ways in the novel or in a nonfiction piece. But it really does pull in this idea, and it just stands way out. Okay, so let me go back to so you guys ready to write? I have 2 prompts for you. Let me go back to our full view so that you can actually see it up on the screen. So I know some of you are working on your own writing. And so I gave you 2 options to do. We're going to write for about 15 minutes here. And I'm hoping that it'll be a way for you to generate something that you can use outside of here. If you don't have something that you're working on right now, you can try this one, mystery inspired prompt from me. A man parks his truck outside of his home on the gravel drive after midnight. His wife opens the front door and meets him at the side of the truck. She wants to know where he has been and why he hasn't contacted her. She noticed that some of the jagged scrap metal pieces in the bed of the truck have blood on them. and you take that where you want. So I've given you the purpose. She wants to know where he has been and why hasn't he contacted her. So this is one option for you. Another option is in your own work and something that you're currently working on, pick a really important moment in your piece or your story. It could be an event, it could be a situation that happens, anything that you think is really important that needs to be slowed down for the reader to really get the full impact of it. And you can write that. And so what I thought we would do is I'll set the timer 15 minutes. How about between 12 and 14 minutes? And we'll come back together, and I'd love to hear if some of you are maybe willing to share some of the things that you wrote. So let me see. I'll set the timer on my phone here for us, and for 12, let's start with 12 minutes, and then we'll see what you guys come up with. Go. You have about a minute or so left to kind of finish up. All right, that's been a little more than 12 minutes. Would you all like another minute or so to finish up? Okay, I'll give you, how about 2 more minutes? All of you are saying yes. Okay, I'll give you about 2 more minutes here. All right, there's never enough time when we get started in these things to, or at least it doesn't feel like there's ever enough time to put together what we're doing, right? But I love that all of you are writing and getting something down. You cannot actually, I don't know, is Elizabeth, can they unmute themselves to share?
I can unmute them. So if somebody is willing to share, if you can just indicate that in the chat, I can unmute you and you can read your piece.
It would be great if any of you are willing to share what you've written or even just tell us about what you wrote. Oh, here we got one from Morgan.
Okay. Sorry, I can't see it.
Morgan Perryman.
Okay, so let me find her. Okay, Morgan, I think you can unmute yourself now. Yeah, there you go.
Hi.
Hey, Morgan.
Hi. And let me get my document. Okay. So I wrote this scene as kind of, I was in my grandma's kitchen and it's just kind of, it always, one of those things that always evokes a lot of emotion, I think, especially people like me who, like, that's our place, you know what I mean? Like, it's our place for holidays, it's our place everything. And like, even though I have my own house, it always like evokes a lot of emotions, I guess,
Uh-huh.
because I always think of her kitchen as a place where things happen. Like my kitchen is a place where I cook, but her kitchen was always a place where things happen. You make cookies, you do turkey, you do whatever. So this is kind of like I turned that and I applied it to my story. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Okay. Do you want to read any of it or
Um, okay, it's not super long because I'm a perfectionist. Okay. Um,
wait,
that
before you start, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I don't know if you can like if you know exactly where the microphone is, if you can.
I turned my microphone down. So hang on a second. I was afraid it was super loud. Is that better?
It's a little bit better, yes.
Okay. I'll try to get closer to the computer. Okay. Um, I'm sorry. Okay. She watched as Liam stood before her, staring at the small farmhouse, and all the time she had spent with him. Never before had he hesitated in anything. It was then she realized this was the first time he'd been home in months. They walked along the side of the house. Weeds had taken over the flower beds. Their spiked leaves reached for their legs as they walked by. The concrete steps of the porch were wide, and pots of all shapes and sizes lined each step. She couldn't help but smile as she realized an old pair of leather boots had dozens of succulents growing from one toe. Liam held the door for her as she navigated through the array of clay pots, broken lawn chairs, and small statues that littered the porch. Wind chimes hanging from the porch cover sang their melodies behind her as the porch door slammed shut. Her face immediately met the warmth of Liam's back as she squeezed into the cramped hallway that led to the kitchen. Maybe he hadn't been waiting for her after all. Maybe he wasn't ready to step inside yet. She reached her hand out and grabbed his, trying to channel support through the simple touch. A shudder went through his chest as he gripped her hand tight and finally stepped into the warm kitchen.
Nice. I love the setup of coming home for the first time in months. That's great. And you've got some really good details there too. Really fantastic. Thanks for sharing. I think who else do we have?
Joy.
Joy, yes, and Susan.
Okay, so
Let's see. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
yes.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. I'm surprised. Okay.
Yeah.
The news hit her hard. 4 students killed at Kent State during an anti-war protest. Kent State was just hours away from her own university. She too had participated in anti-war rallies on campus. It could have been her. It could have been people she knew. She felt sick in her stomach, her chest clenched, hardly able to breathe. Something had to be done about this sunlit spring day as students ambled to classes ignorant of what had just happened. Something had to be done. Someone had to tell them. Some students were starting to gather outside the commons. Someone had set up a microphone outside Founders Hall. Someone was starting to speak of their shock and disbelief. Most students were still in classes, oblivious to what was going on. Someone had to tell them. She went towards the Hamilton Hall. Classes were in progress. She went to the large lecture room and threw open the door and went inside. The National Guard just shot and killed 4 students at Kent State, she blurted. All eyes turned towards her, the professor glaring. Meet outside Founders Hall right now. We have to do something.
That's awesome. Is this nonfiction or fiction?
That's memoir.
Memoir. Okay. That's what I figured. Okay. That's fantastic. Good job. What school were you going to?
Bowling Green State University.
Oh yeah, you were close then.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good job. You have really good details on that as well too. And there's lots of emotional tension. She knows something and they don't, right?
Right.
Excellent. Thank you. And Susan, we have you too.
Hi, Meredith.
Hi.
Okay, let me see if I can get this up here. Okay, great. This is based on that prompt about the truck.
Oh, good. I was hoping someone would do that one.
Okay. Honey, I'm home and I've had a hard day. She was humming along with Shania Twain. Twain's hard day was nothing compared to hers. Where was he? Hubby darling was late again. What would the excuse be this time? Last minute overtime, construction traffic backup, whatever. It was probably that new chick down at Barney's who'd been coming on to all the cuter husbands. She was polite to the old guys, but she sure knew how to flirt with the young ones. Well, finally, here he was coasting into the driveway. Was he being extra quiet or just tired? And was that more scrap metal in the truck's bed? Not again. He was always bringing junk in. Well, not this time. He was just going to have to take it all back to the site or the junkyard or wherever. She was tired of his hoarding. Not here, mister, not tonight, she murmured as she trounced down the stairs toward the truck. He was stubbing out a cigarette and looked up startled as she approached the cab. He started, sorry I'm late, of course, and what new treasures have you brought me? Nothing, just some scrap I can sell to Bernie. Right, it looks like, what's that on the edges? Rust. Rust that leaks. It's nothing, I swear. You should have stopped swearing after our wedding. A lot of good that did you. Now, hon, so did you kill someone this time? No, I didn't kill anyone the last time either, but the night's young. She backed away, slowly.
That's great. That is great. One of the things I was thinking of when you were reading, Susan, and also with Joy's, I mean, actually all of you were using dialogue in ways that were really like gave us an idea of the character, particularly you, Susan. The voice of those characters comes through really, really clear. And that's such a strong point in scene writing too, is to let us hear them, right? So excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we got Alicia Brown.
Okay. Okay, Alicia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
All right. So I play with the idea of a husband being late, but it wasn't the truck.
That's
thing.
okay.
All right. She paced the kitchen floor, waiting for the sound that filled the house every evening at 6 p.m. The creaking of the step on the front porch that he still hadn't fixed after 20 years, the piercing chime of the bells that dangled beside the door, and the jiggle of the knob as it turned. The steps weren't the only thing that hadn't been fixed over the last 20 years. She rehearsed the conversation for months to ensure every ounce of emotion would be removed. This was not the time for tears to interrupt the flow of thought. She wanted her words to be as precise as a sniper's aim. She was resolute. Suddenly, just as predicted, those familiar sounds moved from anticipated to real. As the creaking of the door grew louder, she noticed a colorful bouquet of red roses entering before his smiling face appeared. Those used to be her favorite. She felt nothing, no butterflies, no warmth. Loneliness had filled those places in her heart. I missed you, he exclaimed. I want a divorce, she shot back.
That's a great way to show a surprise in a scene, right? Great turn of events. Definitely not what he was expecting, for sure. Excellent. Anybody else want to share?
Tracy. Looks like maybe Tracy does. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, Tracy. Yes, I do.
Okay,
Tracy.
one more.
Okay, I don't know how good mine is. So I'm basing it on my two friends. The husband is always contacting his wife, always, even when we're on vacation together. She lives, we meet up like once a year and stuff. And she's a nervous Nelly at times.
Okay.
And I actually used the real names. I'm like, so Molly nervously looked at her watch. Almost midnight. Mark had never been out this late without contacting her. He always was home by 8 and in bed by 10. Always during their 20 years of marriage. She debated calling the police as her mind kept thinking of the possible scenarios of where he was and why he hadn't contacted her. Perhaps he was at his mom's house, or maybe he was in an accident when she saw the bright headlights of his truck turning into their driveway. Relief filled her mind. Her heart slowly began to stop beating so fast that she ran outside. Molly, a modest dresser, didn't care that she was in her nightgown as she flung open the front door. The cool fall air greeted her as she hurried to his truck. Mark looked haggard. His clothes were wrinkled and stained, so unlike him. That's when she noticed something that reminded her of diamonds glinting in the streetlight. Small pieces of metal? Instead of rushing to her husband's side, she felt drawn like a moth to a flame to investigate those pieces, especially since they looked as though they had rust on them. Picking up one, she noticed fresh blood on it. Screaming as she dropped it, she fell to her knee. She knew she needed to call the police. The man in the truck wasn't the Mark she loved.
Ooh, that's interesting. A mystery happening there. Excellent. You've done a good job with the characters there too.
Thank you. And she is a very modest dresser, and I know, you know, and he is always like, he's like, over time he's gone less and less when she's with me, like messaging me, but he's always contacting her.
Oh,
Because we live states apart.
okay. Okay. That's awesome. That's great. You guys have done such a good job with this. One of the things that so I know that all of us, no matter what our jobs are pressed for time right now, right? I mean, we're also being pulled in so many different directions that finding time to write right now is a really hard thing. And you guys have come to this, made time for this, which is fantastic. But sometimes when it's our own writing that we're trying to focus on, it's really difficult to get it in the day and all of those kinds of things. So I'm just going to share this with you. I don't know if this would be helpful for any of you at all, but one of the things that I have found, especially since the pandemic hit, was that I'm not able to put together, part of it has to do with my thoughts are everywhere else but what I'm supposed to be writing. But I haven't been able to put together like 2 hours of time and stay focused on my writing for a length of time, or even an hour, really. So what I've been doing, and I've heard some other writers talk about this too, is they made a list of, and I started with this, a list in my current book that I'm working on of places where I know I want there to be a scene. And what I've done is just started writing the scenes when I have time. So even if I only have 15 minutes worth of time that I can write, then I just work on that scene. It doesn't matter if the stuff that comes before it has been written or what's coming after it. I just focus my attention just on that scene. And that has helped me quite a bit to not worry so much about, do I have all the information leading up to the scene? Do I have this? And just focus on writing the scenes. I don't know if that's going to be helpful to any of you, if any of the rest of you are struggling with writing right now, but that is a thing that might work for you if you are. It's really hard for me to concentrate, and the people, like the other writers that I know, are having a lot of trouble concentrating right now too. And so this is a way to kind of steal a couple of minutes and work on something very specific, and hopefully like shape that scene over time, you know, and then move on to your next scene. So it's an idea that you could work with. I have my very last slide, let me go to that really quick, is some additional sources for you on, oh my gosh, I have all this stuff pulled up, hang on. Oh yeah, here we go. Let me see if I can make this full view for you. So there's tons of stuff on the market about writing, writing specifically scenes, right? And almost all fiction books and even the creative nonfiction books that are out there about writing have at least a chapter about scene writing. This one I found really interesting, and I've used this before in some of my classes. The whole entire book is about writing scenes, a scene book, a primer for fiction writers. This one has been really helpful for me. There are times when she gets very theoretical in the way that she writes, but for the most part, the things that she's writing in there are really helpful and really down to earth, right? I also found I think this was published in maybe like Writer's Digest or something like that. I can't remember the exact place where this was, originally, and then he put it on his own website. 8 steps to writing the perfect scene every time. I found this one to be helpful too. And then this book, Writing the Deep Scene, plotting your story through action, tension, and theme are really helpful as well too. There's lots though. I mean, even if you just Google, writing scenes for a memoir or writing scenes for a novel, you're going to get all kinds of things that pop up for you. So anybody have any questions? Let me go back to the chat bar really quick. Oh yeah, here Morgan put, my writing group loves Save the Cat, Write a Novel. Yes, that is wonderful for scene writing, and mostly because it is hilarious, and it's really helpful because I think that screenwriters are really attuned to writing scenes. Like they know that's where their bread and butter is for their story, and so they're used to really focusing in and writing these really strong scenes. Alicia, you asked, what resources do you use or suggest for a novice who wants to write a book or a short story? If you want to write a book, I would suggest Save the Cat, Save the Cat, Write a Novel. It is really, really helpful in thinking about the ways to organize the different elements that you want to have in it and the way that your story will come together. That's a really, really helpful book that I think could help you a lot. And then also these ones about scene that we talked about, the other 2 books, they also have this idea of like, how do you place them and how do you build more of them in order to put the book together as well too. Any other questions or any other ideas of resources for people that you might want to put in the chat?
If your question is something that you'd like to ask, you can raise your hand or put in chat that you'd like to ask a question and I can unmute you.
Stephen King's book, that is a fantastic one too, on writing. It's just called On Writing. And half of the book is about his biography or his autobiography about his different things that he's done in his life and how he came to write. But the second half of it is fantastic about just writing and advice he has about that. And Alicia, when you're saying like, do you suggest for a novice writer, that would be a great one to read too, because he has some really great ideas about the things that should be in books and right like that. NaNoWriMo, I actually was going to ask everyone, is anybody planning to do NaNoWriMo? It's coming up here very soon, November 1st. For those of you who might not have heard of NaNoWriMo, it is for the whole entire month of November. And the goal is to write 50,000 words in a story form, or it could be creative nonfiction too. So, oh, Jude, you're doing it. Excellent. The pre-October now. Awesome. I always say that I'm going to do it. I always start out the month really strong, and then I sort of peter as the month goes out. But the goal is 50,000 words. Oh, Melissa, you're in it too, pre-October. Okay. If you're interested, you can go to NaNoWriMo's website. They have a lot of information out right now. And this could actually really help you, Alicia, with it. There's pre-writing activities for your novel and things like that that might get you thinking about it, and maybe NaNoWriMo will push you too. Nano bio pomo, a blog post every day. That's fantastic. Excellent. I've also heard that NaNoWriMo is also starting to do this in July as well. It's called Camp NaNoWriMo or something like that. So, you have multiple chances to do that. And Morgan is telling us that Save the Cat is actually on sale right now on Amazon, which is fantastic information to have as well. Any other questions?
Meredith, can you talk a little bit about where working on scenes comes in sort of imagining your novel? Is it a place where you can just start, or do you need to do prep work before you just start on scenes? Do you have to have it all planned out before you start on scenes?
I don't think that you do. I mean, there's different modes of thinking about this. There's people who really want to have everything planned out, like an outline and everything planned before they actually begin writing. But I think that especially with scenes, if there's a moment that that you really need to, it's going to be a really important thing in the book. I do think you can just start writing it and thinking about the things that we talked about, like, how can I include voice in this with dialogue? How can I include emotion? How does this character change, or how do I want this character to change in this section? There's a lot to be said about planning, and a lot to be said about the help that it might give you in having a really strong working outline, or some of the things that NaNoWriMo is putting together, like the pre-October, the events that they have are really, really great. And I know, like, Jude, I don't know if maybe if you want to put in the chat bar anything that you've been doing for that might help. But I also think too that there are times when you just have to just start writing. Like, you just have to go, and you might not have any idea where this is going to fit eventually in your story, or where this is going to fit in your book. But it's going to be there somewhere, right? And that's kind of the way that I've been putting my latest book together. I know that there's certain scenes that are going to be in there, but I don't know yet. I have no idea where in the book it's going to come. I don't know if it's going to be in like the first third of the book, if it's going to be more in the middle. I just know it's going to be in there somewhere. And so one of the things I've been doing is just writing these scenes, and I have a folder open on my computer, and I've just been saving these different scenes into that folder. I can't say that's the best way. I don't know about that, but it's what's working for me right now. But I think that really with scenes, like, you can really start writing them at any point. As you start, the more that you do of it, the more then you start to get this idea of your storyline, and where, okay, so this is actually happening after this, and then you start to be able to move them around into the order that you need them to be in, and things like that. But that's a great question.
Can you talk about how scene maybe relates to chapter? I mean, how, or page length, or how long is a scene, and how many scenes per chapter, say? I'm sure
Well,
there's no rule on that, but
yeah, so there's no hard and fast rules, but I would say that generally a scene is usually a couple of pages in a novel, or in like a memoir of some kind. It depends on how long the piece is you're writing. If you're working with a short story and the whole short story is only 8 pages, you're probably going to have scenes that are a lot shorter than that, maybe half of a page versus, 3 pages or something like that. So it kind of depends on how long the piece is that you're working, because you also have so much more room in a novel. You have so much more space to really dive in and really work with a character and their movements and things like that. Whereas in a short story or in a short essay, you don't have a whole bunch of time or a bunch of space to be able to play as much with that. So there isn't a hard and fast rule, but a scene shouldn't be used just to sort of take up word count, which I've actually heard before, like, particularly since we're talking about NaNoWriMo. People sometimes will say to me, like, I freak out because, I really want to get to that 50,000 word count. And the only way I can think about doing that is like stopping everything and trying to make a scene for everything, for every single moment in my book. And that is not necessarily the best mode of going about that, right? Like, remember that the goal of writing a scene is that they should be really memorable moments and moments of change for your character. So showing them like cooking breakfast in the morning might not be as, you might not need 3 pages of that. And so as a writer, you have to make decisions about what exactly is the most important types of things that are happening with it. In terms of chapters, I've seen the trend has been to make these much shorter chapters lately, so that chapters are like sometimes as short as like 3 pages or sometimes 4, and then we also have some writers who have much longer ones. But if you only have a 4-page chapter, you can definitely use most of the chapter in scene. So It sort of depends on how long the chapters are as well too, but I would say as a general rule, just a generalized rule, that each chapter should have at least one thing that's been put into scene.
Okay. It looks like we did have a question from Alicia.
Yeah.
Let me see if.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. My question is, or I had two.
Okay.
What program do you write or organize in? I know that like people use storyboards for like movies or videos. Is there a similar app for writers? And then my second question is, are the book Save the Cat, Write a Novel, do they have exercises? Like just maybe if you're not ready to write a book, but you just need to work on kind of working on your writing in general, like showing versus telling. Is that a good book for that, or are there other resources you would suggest?
Save the Cat does have exercises, but it helps if you actually have like a novel idea in mind, because the exercises it gives you to do are about the novel that you're trying to write. So if you haven't come up with an idea of something that you would want to write bigger, like a bigger piece, then it might not. But if you have an idea in your head and you're not sure how to get it from this idea into paper, this would be a great one. But your question, I was really interested in your question about like, how do you put this together? What do you use? And I have tried really hard. So many of my writer friends use Scrivener and they love it. And they always are like, I would never write without Scrivener. And I've tried really hard to use it. And I just keep going back to just using a Word document. And I actually have multiple Word documents. Actually what I've been doing lately is just a different document for each scene and then putting them into these folder or putting it into my folder. And then I have like a master Word document I'm trying to work with. But there's also one that I recently heard about, like if you really love to plan, it's called Plotter. And it allows you to make a timeline for whatever it is you're working on, whether it's like memoir or creative nonfiction or fiction. So it allows you to make this really nice timeline. And I think that there's also a place in there where it allows you to hold historical documents or something like that. And Susie just put in hiveword.com is a great tool too. I haven't heard of that one, but that sounds great. Yeah, I think that one of the things that's been like, back to your question, Alicia, of like other books, if you're just starting out or like just learning, I think that one of the things that's been most helpful to me and I still consider myself to still be learning about it, is prompt writing. And so I think that there's so many different things out there that can give you prompts, like a writing prompt a day. And then you work with that prompt for the day, something like that, have been incredibly helpful to me. But the web now is so full of information about creative writing, and YouTube, you could watch some videos about writing and different elements of writing there that have been, I mean, it's just great how much is out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anything else from anybody?
Any other questions?
I need to check into HiveWord, Susie. I've not heard of that. How does HiveWord work? Or HiveWord. There's Scrivener is one of the big ones that most people think about. Plotter's another one. I'm trying to think if there's others that I've heard. There used to be one called, I think it was called Storyboard or something along those lines. I don't know if that's still up or not. Okay, so HiveWord helps to develop character and scenes. That's fantastic. Okay.
Great. Last call for questions. Just take one minute here. Well, Meredith, it looks like we are just about out of time, and questions have stopped. So I want to thank you for coming and presenting the story workshop today.
Wow, thank you for all of your input and for putting into the chat bar all this stuff and your willingness to share what you wrote. That's fantastic. And good luck with all your writing.
Okay, yeah, good luck with your writing. We will be posting Meredith's slides, so if you want to go back and look at those. We are recording this session, so if you want to share it with some others, once we get it up and running, we'll let you know. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Meredith.
Thanks. Have a good week.
You too. Bye-bye.